My name's Marcus, and for 19 years, I was married to Nina. We have a daughter together, Sophie. She's 15 now, smart kid. I work as a mechanical engineer down at the local car plant. My days mostly revolve around making sure the machines are humming and everything stays on schedule. It was a warm March afternoon, the sun beating down outside, when I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. I wiped the grease off my hands and pulled it out. The screen lit up. Terry. My neighbor. That caught me off guard. He almost never called me while I was on the clock. I answered quickly. Marcus, you need to get home. Right now. His voice had this edge to it, tight, anxious. My stomach dropped. What's going on? There's a moving truck parked outside your house. A couple of guys are hauling furniture into it. I gripped the phone tighter. What? Who are they? No clue, but they're taking a lot. And, your wife's out there too. Thought you'd want to know. My heart started pounding in my chest. Nina. Are you sure? Dead sure. You better hurry. I didn't hesitate. Slipped my phone back into my pocket and made a beeline across the factory floor. My boots echoed with every heavy step. My thoughts were spinning. Was someone robbing us in broad daylight? Or was it something even worse? I reached my boss's office and knocked once before barging in. Sir, I need to leave. Now. He looked up, surprised, pen frozen above his paperwork. Everything all right? There might be a break-in at my house. My neighbor called, says people are loading up my stuff into a moving truck. His eyes widened. Go. Right now. I didn't stick around. I turned and bolted for the parking lot, heart hammering, lungs tight. Fumbled my keys out, flung the door open, and jumped into my car. The tires squealed as I peeled out, my hands gripping the wheel like my life depended on it. I had no clue what I was about to find, but I knew one thing. This wasn't your average burglary. And Nina being involved. That flipped the whole damn script. I floored it all the way there, and when I finally skidded into my driveway, brakes screaming, I launched myself out of the car and charged forward. Right there in front of me stood this tall, wiry guy with an arrogant posture, barking orders at two other men loading my furniture into the back of a moving truck. Hey! Drop that! I shouted, striding toward him. He barely glanced my way and muttered, mind your damn business. That did it. Before I even realized what I was doing, my fist cracked across his jaw. He hit the ground hard, grunting. But I wasn't finished. I jumped on him, fists flying, pure rage taking over. You think you can just come here and take my stuff? I growled, slamming another punch into him. Middle of the damn day. He tried to block me, arms flailing, but I kept swinging. With one hand, I yanked out my phone and dialed 911. Breathing heavy, I growled into the speaker, there's a guy robbing my house. I've got him down. The dispatcher responded, calm and professional. Sir, please step inside your home and lock the door. Officers are on the way. I let out a cold laugh. I'm handling it. Then I heard it, a high-pitched scream. Marcus. What the hell are you doing? I looked up. Nina was running toward us, her face pale and horrified. She dropped to her knees beside the guy, frantically checking him over, her hand shaking as she touched his bruised jaw. Why did you hit him? She screamed. I stared at her, thrown off by her reaction. Do you know this guy? She snapped her head up, eyes blazing. Yes. He's my boyfriend. It felt like someone punched the air out of my lungs. I could barely breathe. What was all I managed before I drove my boot into the guy's groin, making him fold like a lawn chair. You're my wife, I spat, my voice trembling with fury. And you've got a boyfriend. I kicked him again. He writhed in pain. Nina shrieked, stop it. Marcus, stop. But I wasn't done. I turned toward the moving van, blood boiling. Why the hell is this truck even here? I barked. The guy groaned but didn't answer. That pissed me off even more, so I kicked him again, one more for good measure. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the two movers standing off to the side, arms folded, grinning like they were watching a street fight. Honestly, if I were in their shoes, I might have been entertained too. That's when I heard sirens. Two cop cars rolled up, lights flashing, engines rumbling. Officers jumped out, hands on their belts, scanning the scene. Me, towering over this beaten guy. Nina, kneeling beside him. The movers, just hanging back like bored spectators. One of the cops, a big guy with a hard stare, stepped toward me, putting a firm hand on my chest. Sir, step back. I didn't argue. I took a step back, fist still clenched, chest heaving. I'm the one who called you, I said, frustration leaking into my voice. The cop raised an eyebrow. That right? Yeah, I snapped. Neighbor called and said people were loading up my stuff. I came home and saw this clown, I said, motioning toward the guy groaning on the pavement. Giving orders like he owns the place. The officer turned to Nina, who was still hovering over the guy, cradling his face like he was made of glass. Her eyes were red, not just from anger, but something else too. Guilt, maybe. "Ma'am, can you explain what's happening here?" the officer asked. Nina looked up, swiping at her eyes before she answered. "This man's name is Elliot Brooks," she said, her voice shaky but steady enough. "He's my boyfriend." Even though I'd already heard those words, hearing them come out of her mouth again, so flat, so direct, felt like another punch I wasn't ready for. It hit me in the chest all over again. "I'm leaving Marcus," she added, her tone colder now, stripped of anything that might have once resembled warmth. "And I'm taking my share of the furniture." The officer turned back toward me, studying my face. I probably looked as stunned as I felt. My brain was struggling to keep up. 17 years, marriage, a home, a kid, all unraveling right there on the driveway. All I had left in front of me was a damn moving van and some punk named Elliot who was still rubbing his jaw. The officer cleared his throat. "Mrs. Caldwell," he said, keeping his voice calm, though there was an edge creeping in, "did you ever notify your husband that you were planning to leave?" Nina hesitated, then lifted her chin like she was digging her heels in. "No," he let out a long sigh and rubbed at his forehead, clearly starting to lose patience. "Ma'am, let me make something clear." He gave a quick glance toward the moving truck, then looked her straight in the eye. "If you want to take anything out of this house, you'll need to file for divorce first. Then, after the judge finalizes the asset division, both of you sign a legal agreement that outlines who gets what." Her face lost some color as he spoke. "What you're doing right now," he went on, this time more stern, "is against the law. If your husband chooses to press charges, this qualifies as theft." Nina gasped, like the reality had finally hit her. Her face twisted with frustration as she whipped around to the two movers. "Put everything back," she snapped. The guys just looked at each other, chuckled, and started carrying the furniture back inside, still clearly enjoying the spectacle. They didn't seem too concerned, they probably saw stuff like this all the time. The officer crossed his arms. "You can take your clothes. That's it. I'll stick around and make sure everything stays peaceful until you're gone." Nina spun around, her eyes flashing. "He should be the one to leave," she barked, shooting me a glare like this was somehow my fault. I didn't waste a second. "This house belongs to my mom," I said sharply. "You've got no legal claim to it." Her voice climbed higher. "No, you're the one who needs to leave. I have every right to stay here." That did it. The officer's patience snapped. "Ma'am," he said, his tone ice cold now, "you just tried to walk off with your husband's belongings without telling him a damn thing. Now you've got the nerve to try and kick him out of his own house." He scoffed, shaking his head. "Let's see if he wants to go ahead and press charges." Then he looked at me, waiting. But before I could get a word out, Nina threw her arms up in frustration. "Fine. I'll get my stuff," she shouted and stormed into the house. I stood there in silence, still trying to wrap my head around what had just unfolded. This woman, my wife of almost 2 decades, the mother of our daughter, had been carrying on with another man, plotting to clear out the house and vanish. And if my neighbor hadn't called, I might have come home to nothing but empty walls. A few minutes passed, and then Nina came back out, dragging 2 oversized suitcases behind her. As she moved toward the front door, I raised a hand to stop her. "Hold up," I said, turning to the officer. "I want those bags checked." Nina froze mid-step. She turned slowly, eyes wide, mouth hanging open. "Marcus, seriously," she hissed. "You're really going to humiliate me like this? You don't trust me." That did it. The 2 movers, who'd been watching from the sidelines like they had front-row seats to a soap opera, suddenly burst out laughing. Even the officers traded amused looks, one of them smirking and shaking his head like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. The lead cop sighed. "Open the bags, ma'am," he said firmly. "Your husband's well within his rights to ask." Nina shot me a venomous glare, then yanked open the first suitcase and stepped aside. I crouched down and started digging through her stuff. It was mostly clothes, folded up neatly, like she was going on vacation. But tucked between a couple of sweaters, I spotted something familiar, my laptop and my phone charger. I pulled them out, held them up. She let out a weak sigh. "I need those," she mumbled. I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Shook my head slowly. "Ask your boyfriend," I said coldly. "He can take care of you now." And just like that, she was gone. She packed up, took her so-called soulmate, and walked right out of the life we'd built together. Elliot was still hobbling from the whooping I'd given him earlier, which gave me a little bit of satisfaction. Not much, but something. The house felt different now. Quiet. Way too quiet. The kind of silence that feels heavy, like it's pressing down on your chest. I was still trying to wrap my mind around everything when the front door creaked open. Sophie stepped inside, her backpack slung over one shoulder. She paused in the entryway, eyes scanning the half-packed furniture, the opened suitcases, the muddy footprints from the movers. She dropped her bag. "Dad, what the hell happened in here?" I rubbed my temples, exhaled slowly. "Come sit down," I said, motioning to the couch. She plopped down beside me, waiting for answers. I took a breath, steadying myself. "Your mom, she's gone. She left, with some guy she's been seeing." Sophie blinked at me, then shrugged. "Oh, you mean Elliot?" I turned my head toward her, feeling my grip tighten around the whiskey glass in my hand. "Wait, you already knew about him?" She looked at me like I'd asked the world's dumbest question. "Yeah," she said. "Mom told me. He's her first love. The only man she's ever really loved." Her words hit harder than a punch. I stood, walked over to the liquor shelf, and poured myself another glass. My hands didn't even shake, though inside, everything was spinning. I turned back, drink in hand, and sat down again. "All right," I said, voice calm but tight, "tell me more about this Elliot." Sophie leaned back, arms crossed casually. "Mom's always talked about him," she said like it was no big deal. "She never stopped loving him, you know," Sophie said, calm as could be. "Elliot was her first love." I stared at her, trying to process that sentence, even though part of me had already guessed it. "She married you because, well, you were a good choice," Sophie added with a casual shrug. "A solid guy." I let out a bitter chuckle and shook my head. A good choice. That's all I had ever been. Not her love. Not her dream. Just the dependable guy who happened to be available when the real deal was gone. A placeholder. A safe plan. I took a sip of my whiskey, letting the burn settle in my chest before glancing over at my daughter. "So tell me, Sophie," I said slowly, "do you think your mom made the right call, leaving me for Elliot?" She didn't even flinch. "Absolutely," she replied, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "You were just part of the plan. They were meant to be. He left her because he had to go overseas for school. Now he's back, and they belong together." I gave a slow nod and swirled the liquid in my glass. "Huh. Fascinating," I muttered, leaning back into the couch. The weight of it all started pressing down like bricks on my chest. "So," I said aloud, more to myself than to her, 17 years of marriage was just a placeholder." Sophie hesitated for the first time. A flicker of something crossed her face, maybe guilt, maybe doubt. But then she shook it off, like it was nothing. "Not a lie," she said, correcting me. "Just a temporary setup." I took another drink, but it didn't warm me up this time. It only made the cold settle deeper. I set the glass down on the table, fingers drumming against the side as my brain tried to catch up. "So let me get this straight," I said, looking her dead in the eye. "If Elliot had never left, your mom would have married him instead. You'd be his kid." Sophie gave a small, wistful smile. "Yeah," she said without missing a beat. "It would have been like something out of a romance novel." I laughed under my breath, shaking my head. Incredible. Then another thought popped into my head, something darker. I narrowed my eyes a bit. "So, if you knew about Elliot, who else did?" She didn't need time to think. "Grandma Diane knows." I raised my eyebrows. "Diane? Your mom's mom?" "Yep," she said with a nod. "What about Grandpa Frank?" Sophie shrugged. "He's in the loop, too." My jaw clenched, and my fingers curled around the edge of my glass. I forced myself to stay calm. "And how long have you known about this?" She leaned back into the couch, toying with a frayed bit of her sleeve. "I dunno. 7 months. 7 months. Half a year. That whole time, they all knew. My wife, my daughter, her parents. And not a single one of them had the decency to say a damn word." I nodded slowly, more to myself than anything. "Very interesting." I stood up. Sophie looked at me, curiosity flickering in her eyes. "What are you gonna do, Dad?" I turned to her, a slow, deliberate smile creeping across my face. But it wasn't warm. It wasn't soft. It was something colder. Sharper. "I'm going to give everyone exactly what they want." She smiled back without hesitation, like she was proud of me. "You've done good, Dad," she said. "You gave Mom everything. Now let her be happy. She deserves it." I tilted my head and studied her, my voice calm and smooth. "Don't worry," I said, the smile still on my lips. "I'm not going to stop your mother from getting what she wants. I gave her everything she asked for." I paused, just for a second. Then I added, "And I'll make sure she keeps getting exactly what she deserves." Sophie's smile twitched. Just for a moment. She didn't say anything, but something shifted in her eyes. I stepped closer, slowly reached out, and tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear. "And you," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "You'll get what you deserve too, princess." Her expression cracked for a second. Just a flicker. And I let that silence hang in the air before pulling away. Then, without another word, I grabbed my coat and walked out the front door. I drove straight to my lawyer's office. By the time I pulled into the parking lot, I already knew exactly what I was going to say. The receptionist gave me a friendly smile, but as soon as I told her my name, she got up and led me straight to the back. Maddox looked up from his desk. "Didn't expect to see you today, Marcus," he said, leaning back. "What's going on?" I sat down, folded my hands, and spoke plainly. "I need a divorce. And I want it fast." His eyebrows lifted. "All right," he said, sitting up straighter. "Anything specific you're aiming for?" I leaned forward slightly. "I want full control over everything that's mine. Give her the bare minimum the law requires, nothing more. No alimony, no petty clauses, nothing she can twist later. If she wants more, let her run to Elliot for it." Maddox nodded slowly, taking notes. "Custody." I gave a faint smirk. "Let her have Sophie. They're a package deal anyway." He raised an eyebrow but didn't challenge me. "All right," he said, scribbling more notes. "I'll get the paperwork drafted and push it through the fast track. With how this looks, it shouldn't take long." "Good," I said, standing. "Keep me in the loop." I walked out and drove straight to the bank. Inside, the teller greeted me politely. "Good afternoon, sir. How can I help you today?" I slid my ID across the counter. "I want to empty out my joint account." She typed a few things into the computer, her face neutral, until the balance popped up. Her eyes briefly flicked up at me. "All of it, sir?" she asked carefully. I gave her a small smile. "Yeah. Every penny." Then I paused. "Actually, leave $2 in there." She looked confused for a second, but then nodded. A few minutes later, she returned with a thick envelope. "Would you like this counted in front of you?" "No need," I said, slipping the thick envelope into the inside pocket of my coat. Next stop was my office. I pulled into my regular spot, walked in like it was just another Tuesday, and headed straight for human resources. "Hey, Marcus," Monica, the HR manager, greeted me with a warm smile. "Everything all right?" "Yeah," I said, flashing a polite grin. "Just here to update my 404NF info. I need to remove Nina as my beneficiary." Her eyebrows lifted just a bit, but she nodded. "Of course. We can take care of that right now." A few signatures later, it was done. After that, I made a few quick calls, insurance, retirement accounts, anything and everything with Nina's name on it. In under an hour, she was scrubbed from every policy I had. And then I called my mom. She picked up on the second ring. "Marcus, is everything okay?" I took a breath, slow and steady. "Mom," I said quietly, "you need to hear this from me first." I laid it all out, the affair, Sophie's response, the cold way my daughter had justified everything. I didn't sugarcoat a thing. There was silence on the other end for a moment. Then she sighed. "Well," she said dryly, "looks like the apple didn't fall far from the tree." I let out a low chuckle. "No, it didn't," I agreed. My smile faded into something harder. "But I plan on keeping that apple right where it is." She didn't respond, but I could hear the breath she let out, half weariness, half approval. My mom knew me. She understood I wasn't going to just sit back and let this slide. We talked for a few more minutes before hanging up. The very next day, Nina got served. I knew exactly where to find her, her office, where she was probably floating on cloud 9, high on her fantasy life with Elliot. She was expecting something from me, sure. She knew I wouldn't just roll over. But expecting it and actually feeling the fallout? Two very different things. At first, she kept it cool. I'm guessing she thought it would be a typical divorce, split everything down the middle, maybe squeeze out a bit of alimony, coast on her new chapter. She had no idea. As she flipped through the paperwork, her composure started to crack. Her hands trembled just slightly. I imagined her scanning each page over and over, hoping she missed something, some technicality, some backdoor she could slip through. But there was nothing. I'd made sure of it. The house. Not in my name, it belonged to my mother. She couldn't touch it. The furniture? Same deal. Not hers. Alimony? Not a chance. We made almost identical incomes. All she was getting was child support, and only for 2 more years until Sophie turned 18. Not long after, my phone rang. I let it buzz twice before picking up. "Hello." Her voice came sharp, borderline panicked. "This isn't fair." I didn't respond right away. "I'm supposed to get half, Marcus. That's how this works." I leaned back in my chair, letting a smirk tug at the corner of my mouth. "Oh," I said, acting almost amused. "Yes," she snapped. I was your wife. I deserve half of everything. I took a slow breath before answering, my tone calm but deliberate. And I'm supposed to get half of yours. Silence. I could almost hear the wheels turning in her head as she realized what I meant. I smiled wider. Better let the court decide, don't you think? Finally, the day of the divorce hearing arrived. I walked into the courtroom beside my lawyer, Cole Maddox, a guy who always looked like he was born for this kind of fight. Confident, smug, with that shark-like grin that said he already knew he'd won. A few minutes later, Nina entered with her attorney, Paige Merritt. Cole spotted her and licked his lips, then leaned toward me and muttered, "I'm gonna smash her." I raised an eyebrow. "Same," I replied without thinking. Cole turned and smirked. "I meant legally," he said, though the look in his eye said we were probably thinking the same thing either way. I almost laughed. Almost. Then the judge walked in, and the courtroom fell into silence. Paige was up first. She stood with perfect posture, voice clear and professional. "Your Honor, my client's husband is refusing to pay any form of alimony or offer a fair settlement. We're seeking 50% of his assets, as per the law." Before the judge could even comment, Cole was already on his feet, smoothing his suit as he stepped forward. "Your Honor," he began smoothly, "my client's wife has also refused to give him half of her assets. No settlement offered from her end either." The judge looked between us, his brow furrowing. "So what are you saying here?" Cole walked closer to the bench. "They both earn about the same, Your Honor. So I'm a little conflicted, should we be asking for alimony, or offering it?" The judge let out a sigh and shook his head. "If the incomes are equal, there's no basis for alimony. Simple as that." Nina stiffened. Her hands balled into fists on the table. But before she could argue, Paige jumped in. "Your Honor, there's another matter. My client's husband cleared out their joint account and left exactly $2. Cole didn't flinch. "In fact, I think he enjoyed it. That's precisely what my client's wife contributed to the account," he said, not missing a beat. A pause followed. The judge turned to Nina, waiting. "Anything else?" Paige hesitated, then gave a reluctant nod. "There's also the issue of custody." Before she could expand, Cole cut her off. "We've already offered full custody. My client is not seeking visitation. He'll continue making support payments for the next 3 years until the child turns 18. From the back of the courtroom, I heard a sharp gasp. "Sophie." Her voice cracked as she cried out, "You can't leave me, Dad. I'm your daughter." I didn't turn around. Didn't even glance her way. My jaw tightened, fists curled beneath the table where no one could see, and I kept my eyes locked straight ahead. I'd made my decision, and now I had to follow through. No looking back. The judge, however, shifted his attention to Sophie. His expression softened just a little, and he motioned toward her. "Young lady, would you like to speak?" he asked gently. "Come forward, please." She hesitated, frozen for a second, before slowly walking up to the stand. She looked smaller than usual, shaken, unsure. When she finally spoke, her voice was thin and trembling. I didn't realize my dad didn't love me." She looked ready to say more, but Cole was already rising from his seat, adjusting his tie with casual precision. "Your Honor," he said smoothly, "may I ask the young lady a few questions?" Paige jumped up. "Objection, Your Honor, she's just a child." The judge raised a hand to stop her. "Let it proceed," he said firmly. "Go ahead, Mr. Maddox." Cole approached the stand slowly, his tone calm but deliberate. "Sophie," he began, "do you love your father?" She sniffled and gave a small nod. "Yes." "And do you respect your father?" Another tear, another nod. "Yes." There was a brief pause before Cole asked his next question, careful and measured. "Then tell me, Sophie, why are your parents getting divorced?" Her lip quivered. "Because my mom's ex came back from Europe," she whispered. "And now they want to be together. So, she's leaving him." Cole gave a slow, understanding nod. "So that means your mother either never really loved your father, or she loved this other man more." Sophie opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Her gaze bounced from Cole to the floor. The silence filled the entire room like a fog. She shifted nervously, glancing toward me, but I didn't budge. I didn't meet her eyes. My hands stayed folded. My posture never changed. This was the moment. This exact moment, right here, was the one I'd been waiting for. Cole pressed on. "So, tell me, Sophie, were you upset when your dad lost his marriage?" She froze, eyes flicking to me again, looking for something in my face, some reaction, some warmth. I gave her nothing. Finally, she looked back at Cole. Her lips trembled, and then, softly, "No. I was happy for my mom." Cole arched a brow. "Happy for your mother?" Sophie nodded, wiping at her nose. "Yes. She was going to be with her true love. Cole exhaled slowly through his nose and rubbed his chin, as if letting the words settle in. True love, he echoed, almost to himself. He took a few slow steps, then stopped right in front of her again. So just to be clear, he said, you didn't think about how your father might feel. You asked him not to fight for his marriage. You told him to let it go. To let your mom walk away. Because she deserved to be happy, right? Sophie was shaking now, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes. Cole's expression darkened. He stepped forward just slightly, lowering his voice so the words landed heavy. Then, Sophie, tell me, why should your father care about you? The courtroom went dead silent. Not a cough. Not a chair creak. You could hear people holding their breath. Sophie stared at Cole, wide-eyed, like his words had physically struck her. Her mouth hung open, but nothing came out. Cole didn't flinch. Didn't soften. He leaned just a little closer. And let me ask one final question, he said, voice sharp but steady, a direct quote. You told your father something. Let me remind you what it was. He turned to glance at me, then back to her. If Elliot had never left, your mother would have married him, and you would have been his daughter. That would have been perfect, like a fairy tale. He let it sit in the air for a moment, giving it weight. Is that what you said, Sophie? She stood there frozen, but eventually, with no way to deny it, she nodded. Yes. Cole nodded back, like he'd just tied up the last thread. But he wasn't finished. You wanted to be Elliot's daughter. You were ready to turn your back on the men who stayed up all night when you had a fever last year. The men who never missed a single recital, a single parent-teacher meeting, not one sports event. That men. Sophie squeezed her eyes shut, trying to hold it together. But Cole pressed on, relentless. You wanted to forget about the father who wore the same 3 shirts to work for 2 years just so you could have roller skates for your birthday. He shook his head in disbelief. And now, here he is, giving you exactly what you wanted, your mother and Elliot, together. One happy family. He let that silence hang for a final beat, and then asked the question that broke her. What's wrong with that? Sophie collapsed into tears, full-on sobbing. Her shoulders shook as she choked out her words. I'm sorry, Dad, she cried. I wasn't thinking. I didn't mean it. Please don't leave me, that hit me. For the first time in that room, I felt something inside me crack. My throat tightened, and my eyes blurred for just a second. Everything in me wanted to get up, go to her, hold her tight and tell her I'd never let her go. But I didn't move. I couldn't. I had to stay strong, for both of us. I clenched my jaw and kept still, locking the emotion down like a vault. I couldn't let it take over. Not yet. The judge had been silent through the entire exchange, eyes sharp, watching everything. Finally, he exhaled and looked at Sophie. That's enough, young lady, he said, his voice softer than before. You may return to your seat. Sophie nodded weakly and stepped down. She wiped her face with trembling hands and made her way back to her chair, her crying now quieter but still steady. Then the judge turned his focus toward Paige. Ms. Merritt, he said, his voice colder now, his patience thinning, your response. I believe Mr. Maddox interrupted you earlier, the judge said, his tone flat. You may continue. Paige stood, brushing invisible lint from her blazer, that same smug look glued to her face. Thank you, Your Honor. She cleared her throat and lifted her chin like she was about to deliver something profound. My client and her fiancé do not wish to pursue custody of the child, she said plainly. They are engaged to be married and do not want the child in their care or presence. The courtroom fell into a stunned silence. The judge's face immediately darkened, turning a shade of red that spelled trouble. His gaze cut straight to Nina, who sat stiff as a board, her eyes locked on anything but the people around her. And Sophie. She just crumbled. The moment those words hit her ears, she broke all the way down. Her crying echoed through the courtroom, raw, loud, and painful. It sliced through the silence like a jagged blade. The judge rubbed his temples with both hands, looking like he'd aged 10 years in 10 seconds. Then, with visible irritation, he turned to me. Mr. Reed, he said, his voice heavy with frustration, you don't want custody. Your wife doesn't want custody. What are you two doing? Your egos, your arrogance, this will ruin that girl's life. I stood slowly, took a breath to steady myself. Your Honor, I said calmly, my mother, Janet Reed, has agreed to take full custody of Sophie. We've already spoken. She's ready. The judge stared at me for a long moment, then gave a sharp nod. He brought his gavel down with a loud crack. Custody of the minor will be granted to Mrs. Janet Reed. Both biological parents will contribute child support. No alimony, no settlement. Divorce is granted. The gavel hit the bench again, final, cold, absolute. I turned toward Cole, who had been watching the drama unfold with an almost amused expression on his face. He leaned in slightly, grinning. That, he whispered, might just be the fastest divorce in human history. After the court was adjourned, I made my way over to my mother. Sophie was already sitting beside her, head down, face wet with tears. My mom had a hand on her back, rubbing slow circles in that quiet, comforting way only a mother knows. But Sophie's sobs hadn't slowed. I sat down next to her, just watching her for a moment. The weight of everything hit me all at once, like a cold stone settling in my chest. Then I spoke, gently. "Sweetheart." She lifted her head slightly, her red, swollen eyes searching mine. "We don't live in a fairy tale," I said quietly. "This is the real world." She didn't reply, just sniffled and kept her eyes on me. "I never wanted to abandon you," I continued, "but I needed you to understand what it feels like when the people you love toss you aside. When they treat you like you don't matter anymore, like some worn-out pair of shoes." She flinched. I could see the words hit. "I know it's easy to forget the things people do for you," I went on, my voice low but steady. "Especially when you start to think it was their job to do those things. But love and respect aren't guaranteed. They have to be earned, and returned." Sophie wiped at her nose with her sleeve. Her hands fidgeted in her lap, fingers twisting around each other. "Love," I said, "isn't a one-way road. You give it, and you should get it back. Same with respect. But when all you give is judgment or betrayal, that's what you'll get in return." She nodded slowly, her lower lip trembling. "I've always loved you," I said, voice softening. "But in return, all I got was shame, embarrassment. You sided with someone who walked away from our family like it was nothing. That hurt, Sophie. It hurt more than I can explain." Her breath caught in her throat, and she turned her face away, ashamed. "If I'd let you walk all over me today," I told her, "you'd think it was okay to do the same to others down the line. But not everyone's gonna react like me. One day, you might hurt someone who'll hit back, hard." She shivered slightly, her whole frame trembling. Then, in the smallest whisper, she said, "That wouldn't be good." When she looked back up at me, her eyes were different. Not just teary, there was understanding behind them now. Real understanding. "I'm sorry, Dad," she said. "I didn't mean it. I really didn't." And then, without hesitation, she threw herself into my arms. She clung to me like she was afraid I'd disappear if she let go. Her sobs came harder, deeper. I held her tightly, wrapping my arms around her as everything poured out, every bit of pain, regret, confusion. I held her for a long time. Eventually, she pulled back, wiping her face with the back of her hand. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes red, but there was something softer in her expression. Something real. She sniffled. "What about Mom?" she asked quietly, almost afraid to say the words. I exhaled through my nose, a weary smile tugging at my lips. I knew that question would come eventually. I reached out and gently tucked a loose strand of her hair behind her ear. "Well," I said, "she made her decision. She chose to walk away from me, and from you. She picked her path." Sophie's bottom lip quivered, but she didn't look away. "She gave up the right to call herself a wife. Gave up the chance to keep being your mom in the way that mattered. Now we let the future decide where she ends up. But we don't chase people who don't want to be chased." Sophie blinked slowly, trying to wrap her head around that. "She never really loved me, Sophie," I said gently. "So in a way, she did me a favor. She freed me from a life built on a lie." Her eyebrows pulled together. "And as painful as it is," I continued, "she abandoned you, too. Which means she also freed you from holding on to false hope. That's a strange kind of mercy." Sophie didn't say anything right away, but I could see it, she got it. Finally, she leaned in and hugged me again. Tighter this time. Like she wasn't just saying sorry, she was holding on to the only truth she had left. And I held her back, knowing this moment meant everything.